Hi, I'm Bernard Moon. I'm a co-founder and partner at SparkLabs. And I'll let just our speakers give a brief background on themselves, starting with Mitch. And Will is actually filling in the original speaker, Jay Choi. He is stuck at a delayed flight in LA. So.
Thanks. Hello. Thank you, Bernard, for having me. My name is Mitch Grossback. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Someone Great Capital. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And my focus and concentration is working with people who are very famous in the sports, music, and entertainment world and helping them invest and become owners of companies, not just Web3, but partially Web3, but in other areas as well. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Can you name some of your clients? Or?
Can I name some of my clients?
Yeah.
Bernard is a client of mine. Some of my clients are, do people watch the NFL football, National American Football League here? A little bit. Okay, so I have some clients in that world. One of them is named Marshawn Lynch, who's actually here with me in Korea. I work with some people in the music space. I've worked with Drake. I've worked with Miguel. I've worked with Courtney Love. I've worked with ASAP Rocky, if anyone likes hip hop. 𝐂𝐫𝐲𝐭 and a number of others. And then in the entertainment space and fashion space, I have many, many clients, people from that world that I've worked with over the years.
Thanks, Mitch.
That makes our job sounds really boring. I'm Will. You guys are stuck with me today because Jay can't be here. I'm from SparkLabs FinTech, based out of Hong Kong. So in other words, I look at primarily financial sector opportunities across mostly Greater China, but been working with SparkLabs for a good amount of time. So very excited about where the whole group's going.
Well, let's just start off with, I guess, like an easy question in terms of what are the general areas right now that you like in entertainment, media, or Web3 in terms of, investor perspective?
So my world, I look at Web3 through entertainment, right, and media. I would say that 2 or 3 areas that are most interesting from our standpoint would be anything having to do with sports betting. The ability to leverage the platform, blockchain, Web3 technologies in order to democratize that. Also, esports and gaming. We know many evolutions are happening now in the gaming space around blockchain and being able to track things that happen that you couldn't track before. And then, of course, music. Many of the people I work with care about the rights to the music that they create, and they've never had control over not just the music, but everything that comes with the music. So clothing, merchandise, tour merchandise, ticketing, all of those things. Those would be the 3 areas for me.
Got it. What about you, Will?
I look at it from the investment perspective. I would say this movement towards DAOs, right, decentralized autonomous organizations, where essentially usually the investment officer makes all the investment decisions. Now they're decentralizing that and passing some of that onto the investor community, and we think that's going to become a increasingly larger part of what the Web3 investment landscape is going to look like. We're seeing a lot of that at the retail level now. I think as we continue to mature and that becomes a little bit more institutionalized, I think that's going to become a pretty important area.
Well, why don't we shift to the current environment? I mean, me personally, especially being in Silicon Valley, I sort of like this past year since valuations have gone down and have become more reasonable versus last year, driven by Tiger Global and some of these hedge funds that went downstream. What would your advice be to entrepreneurs, here in the audience and elsewhere, in terms of, if they're fundraising for their round right now?
It's been a tough conversations, right? We've had probably over the last 6 months, before the real sort of big downturn, trying to get companies comfortable with the idea that the storm's coming. And that's always a tough conversation. Many believe that they have the best product in the market. They're not going to be affected by it. But in reality, everybody's going to get hit. So it just depends on how we believe the team is receptive to sometimes our advice, and making sure that they stay on course to clearly trim down, stay lean, at the same time keep their eyes on the prize, as far as keep generating revenues even in this tough time. Pivoting, if necessary, some of these conversations. And then as far as fundraising goes, to be honest with you, right now, probably difficult for many companies. Not to say no rounds will be done, it's just very difficult. So it's a matter of survival. And unfortunately, these are not pleasant conversation at times, but as an investor, that's what we have to do.
Mitch.
So my take is a little different because I don't run a traditional fund structure. I would say a lot of these businesses we see look very similar, and it's for people who are more laymen in the Web3 space, it's all about utility and practicality, and can you understand the business in 5 minutes or less. So I probably see 10 or 15 pitches a month that are in this space, of which 1 or 2 I get it instantly, and the rest I don't understand it. It's too technical. And I say that's one thing. The other piece of criteria would be, many of the people I work with would very much like to be part of companies in a way that they can be hands-on involved and become owners of these companies. And it's not just because they want to write a check, but it's because they want to do something that they can't do when they're playing football or in concert. And they'll do that sometimes without writing a check in order to get equity. We call that sweat equity, right? So if I don't know how many people are founders here, if most or all, but I would say one really clever thing to do is figure out what type of a high profile person, an influencer, can move the needle of your business and try to bring them into your business and make them an owner. Not necessarily having to write a check at the beginning, but they'll help you raise money if you attach them to it. So, when I attach Drake to something or someone like that, people will want to fund that business because of the commitment there. So I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
That's a quick follow-up, Mitch. When you're saying that you wanted the business to be understandable within 5 minutes, is that something over the years that you found, if it's too complex, that it cannot pitch to you within that period of time, generally it doesn't quite work?
Yeah, I see a lot of people solving problems that aren't really problems, or problems that are, not evident as why they're a problem. I think you're right. If it's, hey, this is how we can protect your artwork using this technology. This is how you can bet with somebody without having to pay a middleman. If it's crystal clear, it's so much easier for us to invest in, right? As opposed to, here's an infrastructure. Businesses are really hard to digest, especially for my community of investors, things that deal with what I call plumbing. So, I don't mean to dumb it down, but you have to make these pitches much more practical.
I guess sort of related to that, and separate, even over the past couple months, I would meet entrepreneurs I felt like that didn't get the memo on the whole valuation topic. So even at the seed stage, you'd see some entrepreneurs still trying to get like pre of 30 million, right? I'm like, really? Right? I mean, what are some like red flags that you encounter when you meet founders? Not just this year, but in general.
Well, that, right? Just people that are kind of unaware that, pretty crudely, that the world's on fire, right? I mean, they only see sort of the through rose-colored lenses without really awareness of how difficult things are out there and how it's ultimately going to implicate a lot of things they're doing. So, again, it is our job to sort of get that through to these entrepreneurs. But in cases where, we're already invested, that's obviously, we got to do. In cases where they're pitching us, I think one of the things that we're looking for in terms of red flag would be, what kind of risk are these guys sort of aware of, articulating, and they're planning the business around that. Not just focus on the good parts, but really protect themselves against the bad part as well.
Yeah, and for me, it's valuations are confusing to me, because at the end of the day, a valuation is right? Like, I think we like businesses that raise money in a more simplistic manner. So a note where there's a valuation cap, but it's more tangible than setting a valuation, especially in early stage. That instrument of raising capital for us is a little more tangible, a safe note or a convertible or something. And the other thing is, I think when you look at valuation, you have to look at, all right, if you're pre-revenue or you're very early stage and you're not, profit is less important, obviously, at the early stages for us than it is like, is there a customer for what you're doing? Is there somebody who's engaging with you? Is it in the market? Is it solving a problem? And then the valuation, I think, can be much more digestible than it's just an idea and we're trying to, seed stuff is very hard for what I do, because ideas aren't businesses necessarily. So, it's hard to get behind that for my community of investors. But I would just say, be realistic. This is not an easy market to have, lofty valuations are things we like to say no to before we even dig in.
Yeah, I would add to that there's an increasing emphasis now on, certainly revenues, right? But I think people are starting, at least in my case, Hello? Sorry. Starting to talk about at least path to profitability, right? How are you going to get there? And that's something now on a lot of fundraising rounds that we're in discussion with, maybe not just us, but other investors that we know are considering co-investments, starting to really drill down on where's the revenues coming from, and show us that path, right? Very clear path. And I think that's we're going to increasingly see that.
I agree. Related to the Web3 space, I would say I'll give you three choices to discuss, or add addition to: metaverse, NFTs, or next.
Next meaning something else?
Yes. You reject the
next.
first two.
I mean, look, so I'm very opinionated about this. So if you want me to, I can give the opinion.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay, great. So NFTs to me mean nothing. Like they're and again, an NFT business in my world is not enough. So the first version of NFT sort of in the collectible space, oh, here's an athlete and here's a series of NFTs that are driven around that athlete, and you could own one, and there's only 200 of them, and then there's a marketplace, and boring. And the reason is that I don't think that worked at the beginning, but then people started to collect these things and then say, well, now what do I have that is worth anything? And it became a sort of a transactional marketplace, which means the talent who are the creative talent, the athletic talent that are really behind these NFTs don't relate to it, right? Metaverse. So metaverse is completely interesting once it actually has utility. I think going in with an avatar into a metaverse and interacting with other avatars and so forth, it's cute, but it's not, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody who's working in that world, but there has to be something more than just walking around somewhere and looking at cool spaces. And I know there is, right? I understand that you can do a lot more, but it's all about that business pitch of like, what exactly can I sell this in there, and how do I do that, and how do I find out everything about the people that come in there, and how do I get people to go in there, and like so I guess my answer is next.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess you didn't like Zuckerberg spending, what was it, $6 billion recently on his metaverse projects?
Next.
But I'm sorry, this is not my area, so I'd spend my time maybe following up on Mitch's answers. Do you think the metaverse issue is, like you were saying earlier, a plumbing issue? Like, is that going to once that's developed, it's going to look like a something that's investable?
Yeah, potentially. I think marketplaces today, from what I've seen, are somewhat commoditized. Meaning they, again, you have to remember, I'm not sophisticated the way other technical people would be, so it looks like every other how is each metaverse different from one another? How do I differentiate as an investor? Which one do I decide to put money into? They all functionally seem to have the same concept, right? NFTs, same thing. I get what that is. I know how to buy one. Marketplaces, I know what they do. I think there's something missing that's kind of in between all these things, which is community. And what I've learned is that if you find like-minded people and you build a community, and that community can then interact with both digital, physical, and experiential types of things, then that becomes more interesting. So I view the metaverse as a way to just create that interaction, but I also view it as, I don't want to say commodity, but until something's different, I don't know how to distinguish them.
You want to answer it, Will?
I'm just going to copy his answer.
Next.
Since we're running behind, at this point, I just want to open it up to the audience. If anyone has any questions for, I guess, any of us, please raise your hand. Andrew.
So, I mean, despite all the issues with fundraising and all that, so the life has to go on, and technologies continue to innovate. And so, just looking down, let's say 2-3 years down the line, right? I mean, what do you guys feel most excited about? That's what I want to know, right? So, because while it's unfortunate for the entrepreneurs and some of the startups, it is going to be a buyer's market, and there's going to be a lot of good opportunities to invest into good companies. So what areas should we be looking at? Just looking maybe even 2, 3, 5 years down the line.
Well, and I apologize, media is not my area, but what gets me excited about, on the fintech side at least, is we do a lot of investments now in sort of developing markets. And right now, actually, we have a big effort pushing in Pakistan, which is one of the largest populations in the world, 5th largest population in the world, with a very young demographic. But clearly, they're hit by a lot of macro factors as well as natural disasters. But what we've invested in right now are some of the, I think, layers that's going to enable essentially the underprivileged to access basic financial services, which we've seen this story play out in a lot of markets. But in the frontier markets, we think this is extremely important. And we invested so far in a embedded fintech company that's going to allow essentially a lot of more basic community-based groups to offer basic financial products to let's say farmers, teachers, healthcare workers, so on and so forth. That's not existent in the past, but essentially it's going to allow people to at least access some of the things they haven't been able to. Now, that may take a while to materialize because of all the things that's happening in the world, but we think that the mission of the company will materialize in, let's say, 2 years from now, and that's something that we can build a lot of things on top of. So that's sort of the things that I'm looking forward to within my portfolio.
Yeah, and I would say personally, I'm excited about some of the non-media applications, like being able to buy a house in America and not have to deal with a bank, and being able to sort of close on that house and the mortgage and do all of that work through a blockchain-based process as opposed to what we do today, which is a nightmare and time-consuming. Back on the media world, I would say anything that gives a person or a business that owns intellectual property the ability to build new revenue streams and control those revenue streams. So whether it's, the very obvious examples are, artists, as we've seen, selling their art digitally. Okay, that's a good basic one. Recording artists who create music, How do they control that as opposed to their record label? A lot of people who work for record labels won't like hearing that, but they're going to have to live with it, and they better figure it out quickly, because Napster was nothing compared to what this technology is capable of if, if it's used in the right way, and it already is. And people who are recording artists, they want to control what they call their masters. Those are the most valuable pieces of their music. Athletes, well, the leagues control a lot of their intellectual property. I can't put a picture up here of someone in an NBA uniform like LeBron James without the NBA saying you're not allowed to do that. But LeBron James controls himself. So how does he create content and intellectual property, interact with you, and do it in a way where he could own a piece of that forever? That's, to me, the big opportunity is enabling creators and people who have talent and who are innovators to take their intellectual property, but also not just people like that to control it and own it, but brands, right? Vans, for example, like how do you give them the opportunity to interact with consumers in a different way where now they can track that consumer forever? Can't be done without blockchain. So that would be my answer.
Thanks, guys. Any other questions? First, yeah, right there, you, and then Jim behind, but why don't you go first?
Hello. Hi, my name's hello. I'm from Orange County, but I recently moved to Korea. I'm going to be living here for a year, and I've been meeting a lot. Like I have a friend, he has an NFT project called Supernormal by 𝐓𝐫𝐞𝐬, and they're building out the IP in Korea, and they're currently looking for investors. So I'm wondering, do you invest into like existing NFT projects that launch and are building the IP? I'm also an advisor for this one project. They're creating like the Zillow of OpenSea, because it's really hard to filter through like metaverse land and on OpenSea. So are those types of projects that your companies would invest in? Or is it mainly just, they're getting into the music industry as well, this NFT project with pop groups and stuff, so maybe that's something interested.
Yeah, anything K-pop we can talk about for sure. No, but yes, all of those things are interesting, and it's we're we don't discriminate by location, and certainly any of those ideas are interesting to learn more about.
Hello. No, we've been fairly active in the NFT space. We invested in the seed round of a company called Genies. So they do all the NFTs for Universal Music and Warner Music artists. We invested in a company called Mint NFT that's at the intersection of fashion and NFTs. They're actually speaking tomorrow. And then we also invested in, actually Jimmy led into a Italian startup doing music NFTs. I forgot their name. What's their name? What? Rots? Oh, Brats, that's right. Yeah, so we've been fairly active. So if you want, you could contact our colleague Eugene. You don't have to email me. It's Eugene@SparkLabs.co.kr.
Hey, my name is Jim Ree. I'm wondering, these new business models, does anybody ever look at the sociological or like psychological potential impact, on society in general? So like Meta and the metaverse. I mean, I assume for it to be successful, it's like something out of Surrogate. People have day jobs, maybe they don't, but they spend all their time kind of addicted to spending time on the space, and you got to monetize that. It's like AI, and is there going to be a singularity? But do you guys think about this at all when you invest in these type of spaces? What is the actual impact to society? I just want to make money.
Look, I think to some degree, yes, but not entirely. The obviously, many of the people I work with who invest are completely interested in being responsible investors, and that means, you know, there's a lot of concern over the energy used to mint things, and you know, again, most of my folks don't get into that level of technical degree, but yeah, I mean, we look at impact from two perspectives. One would be that. The other would be, are there business applications? And I'll talk mostly about sort of the, I guess, the environment, right? Like I have a client, Miguel, his name is, he's a recording artist, and he's launching his clothing brand in connection with a Web3 community. And he's doing that not because he wants to just make NFTs of the clothing, because I told you earlier, that's boring, right? The reason he's doing that is because he doesn't want to print up 1,000 t-shirts that he wants to sell and then cross his fingers and hope that you'll all buy those t-shirts and he'll have none left. Because the reality is every t-shirt you make, you know, hurts the planet unless you use a specific method, which he does, but most people don't. So, you know, by only making as many t-shirts as the community wants is, I think, one way to answer your concern over responsible consumption. We call it sort of responsible conscious consumption. And without a doubt, if you can have a community of 1,000 people who are interested in you and 200 want to buy that t-shirt, and the way they do it is through the Web3 community, and then we know who they are, then we can only make that many t-shirts, that's doing better. It's not completely solving the problem, and it's not 100% an answer to your question, but it's, I guess, a minute example of it, hopefully.
Well, thank you, Mitch and Will, for speaking on this panel. And then, yeah, we'll go on to the next exciting panel with New Media Voices.
네, 감사합니다.